was chosen. It takes a certain type of person, not perfect, but a certain type of person.
We work to implement community safety and transform justice to ensure freedom from violence.
People deserve to change their lives. It's a matter of transformation.
We out there saving lives and changing people's direction, man, it's great.
My name is Melvyn Hayward. I'm the Senior Director of the Gang Reduction and Youth Development Department in Mayor Karen Bass's office for the City of LA. I've been a CVI practitioner for 26 years now. Community violence intervention practitioners are folks that are indigenous to community, that wanted to give back and provide support in community, and specifically working with folks that are involved in gang violence or in gangs.
My name is Fernando Rejón. I'm the Executive Director of the Urban Peace Institute in Los Angeles. We work to implement community safety and transform justice to ensure freedom from violence. All right. So Mel, you've been doing this work for a while now. How long you been in this field now?
26 years in August.
26 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, right now it's at a point where we haven't seen it before. You know, when you all started, doing the work, very grassroots, getting the communities together, having conversations, bringing the elders in, making sure you're connecting with the youth. I mean, how have you seen the field evolve? I mean, I remember when we first started out working together, like in 2008. Mm-hmm. Here we are, 17 years later. What's changed, bro? Like, the trials and tribulations, all the challenges we've had.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that's changed the most is professionalizing the field.
Yeah.
It was needed. Urban Peace Institute played a critical role in making sure that shift happened. I think that we have gotten younger throughout the years. We've added a lot more Latino interventionists in the city, which is needed. And I think that the elders who have been around the work for a long time are starting to be put in positions that, one, they deserve, but also having the opportunity to mentor and guide the work and letting that next generation come in and hit the ground to do some of that hardest work. So I'm happy where we are in LA. There's been history made throughout the years. And so I think now it's about fine-tuning our work, the work that Urban Peace Institute is doing, the work that we're doing in the mayor's office. I think we're blending public-private dollars, but also adding additional boots on the ground. I think I'm optimistic about where we're headed.
Yeah. And at the beginning, we always had to say it's always black and brown. Right? Why was that so important? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because when we look nationally, the landscape it's different in different cities.
For sure.
Why is black and brown so important in LA?
I think for the history of intervention in LA, it's been that way. I think the bigger voice was the African American interventionists and practitioners, but I think it is balanced out much more tremendous, and we need to be a reflection of the communities that we're serving. And so to have the opportunity to have black and brown in the room together, understanding one another, but also making sure that the services are tailored for specific communities is important. And when you think about the landscape nationally, in Chicago, I had a team of 99% African American. And it was an interesting dynamic, but we partnered with brown organizations, and you know that there are different optics and the work has to be done differently, but I think folks need to be at the table with an equal voice, but also recognizing that everybody is important. And so I'm happy on where we are in LA. I think that there's some equity. I think the work that you all are doing to add additional dollars and help develop nonprofits is extremely important. But if you look at it, African American men and women, Latino men and women, the voice is being elevated, and I think it'll be more impactful on the ground. If you think a snapshot of last year, 26% reduction in LA, that's huge, right? And that's because the representation is right. And obviously we need to elevate it, but I'm happy. I'm happy with where we are, black and brown in LA.
the last iteration of the comprehensive strategy in LA, right? Which people, you could say there was when the grid started in 2007, I believe August of 2007. You were a part of, helping to build out this comprehensive strategy, working with us on training, providing intervention services, et cetera. And then you went out to Chicago and you saw how Chicago built theirs from the ground up. So not only kind of training from LA, but also, supporting them and their infrastructure, moving out there, helping them build out a system. I guess, what have you seen? I mean, you've seen two major cities work hard to reduce violence and save lives. People on the front lines, working with them, struggling with them, you know how it is. I mean, what have you learned? Like, what do you think?
For me, I think Chicago was the best experience at that particular time. I think timing is everything. And so for me to transition away from an agency that I helped co-found and work with for 20 plus years, I think it was right for me to go. And knowing our LA story and how hard we worked to get to where we are now in LA, seeing Chicago's story operate a little bit differently was refreshing for me. They kicked it off with a huge investment from the philanthropy, which was different from us, right? And so being able to organically develop an infrastructure for CVI and then help city, county, state come along, I think really was a tremendous opportunity for folks to get huge investment, but also a level of accountability on the kind of work that needed to be done in Chicago, but then a level of saturation because of the violence. And it's a little bit different in Chicago. I think the timing was good. And then for me to have the opportunity to build a team, us laying the foundation and coming in and training just a little bit differently, letting Chicago see it from a different lens, I think helped elevate my relationships, but also give me the license to operate, to do the work. And so I think some of the best practices in Chicago, we help bring that there, but I think we could also reciprocate that energy by using some of those best practices and start disseminate them here in LA.
Every time I get an opportunity to go to Chicago, they come out here, it's all love. Like, we go out to eat, break bread together. And I always make sure that I mention is that synergy that we have. It's, mom crying in Chicago is the same as a mom crying in LA. It's the same communities that are struggling. And so I think part of the beauty of this movement that a lot of people don't see. We talk about infrastructure, we talk about the politics and the funding, which are really important. But that spirit, that spirit of the work that goes beyond city borders, state borders, right? Maybe you talk a little bit about what's that spirit like? What do you see that? How would you articulate that?
I think the energy in CVI in particular is like never before. I think there's a level of momentum that we've gained here in LA and Chicago, but across the country. And more importantly, I think what we've been able to do great in the last 4 or 5 years is build relationships, really important relationships across the nation, learn from one another, have candid conversation about what works, what doesn't. But you can always see it when you walk in a room with other practitioners from other cities and leaders, and it's all love, right? And that wasn't like that many years ago. Even when we started in '08, we knew of other practitioners or leaders in different cities, but now we've been able to be around one another long enough to share best practices, to scrutinize things that we don't necessarily agree upon. But at the end of the day, knowing collectively that the investment for our work is continuing to move upwards, which means, in my opinion, the opportunity for us to really reduce violence in a transformative way. And for me, that makes me happy.
Yep. So, you've been training in LA and then nationally for years, all those road trips, traveling.
Classic.
That's right. A lot of good stories, right? With all the brothers. What role has training played in building up a CVI infrastructure? You've seen it in Chicago and LA, but also you've seen it in other cities like DC, Memphis, Columbus.
Yeah, Oakland, Sacramento,
Yep.
For sure. For me, training has been pivotal. Personally, in my life, I have been a student of this work forever and has benefited from, folks like Howard Euler, Tony Massengale, Bill Martinez, Jim Brown, Harry Belafonte. So being a student of them, for me, when we started doing our work, and training here in LA, practitioners, LAPD, and others, I think it forced a different level of accountability for folks doing the work on the ground. Because when I started, there was no professionalization of this work. And so it, one, added the level of professionalism needed. And there was a worry about over professionalizing the field, right? And so I think we kept a fine line, but I see folks that were practitioners back then now leaders of their organizations, that are managers, the supervisors. And I don't think that would have happened without us incorporating the La Vida Academy and the work that's been done across the country. Urban Peace set a tone, and you started to see academies pop up in different cities and folks wanting to have that kind of infrastructure. Training, we wouldn't, if it wasn't for training, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Absolutely. I think that's what I've learned the most, I think, is being able to spend time with the brothers and sisters who train with us from LA.
For sure.
But then just going and sitting down and breaking bread. You know, it's when you go to these other cities, you know, they invite you in, you know, come to our community, you know, come eat with us, let's break bread. And I think that goes a long way. I mean, that's beyond a transactional relationship. It's transformational, and, you know, being able to stay in contact with folks. You know,
sure.
I'm sure you still get calls. I get calls every once in a while from other cities, like, hey, just want to say what's up, or just checking in.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's part of the beauty, and that's part of the story that a lot of people don't know when you're talking about building infrastructure.
I agree.
The behind the scenes work, and, you know, I guess getting back to that spirit, it really comes from love. It's just like this love for the people and love for the work, for the movement, you know.
Man.
So that's just one of the things that, you know, I reflect on, I think, you know, after, you know, all these years grinding. I feel like we've been grinding just nonstop, whether you're in Chicago, LA, or any other city.
Sure. Staying
connected, but also making sure that we keep each other focused on that mission with the other brothers and sisters that are national leaders in this work.
Absolutely. And you said it, though, and I'm glad you said it. Is some folks may look at it as, you know, that's a touchy word, but the love for the mission, the love for the level of commitment for colleagues who've been operating together. I consider you my brother. We've been in some weird situations, but also stood strong and had one another's back. And for me, those relationships have also protected the integrity of our work. Because you and I have been in rooms where we had to defend our work and defend the folks that are doing the work on the ground, but then also elevate the voice of others that are on boots on the ground and may not be in rooms. And time again, you and I have elevated those voices with other colleagues across the country. And that's what it's about. But it's the love that goes back to the desire to see community shift the paradigm and have folks live in places that don't always have to be violent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we deserve it, right?
Absolutely.
Everybody deserves peace.
Yes, sir.
The U.S. Attorney General say everybody deserves safety, right?
Yeah, that was powerful.
Right, but the safety in more affluent areas is different than the safety that's needed in our community. We need a different type of safety, a wraparound safety. We need community-led safety, right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
I mean, going along with that, you know, with law enforcement, I think part of the challenge is really differentiating the role. I think law enforcement has had to control the narrative around public safety. So when people think of public safety, of course they think of PD, law enforcement, and we're trying to expand this idea of public safety and ensure that there are community-led practices that lead to better safety outcomes and health outcomes that don't rely on criminalizing folks.
For sure.
What have been the challenges of maintaining the firewalls with law enforcement and getting folks to understand the difference in approach? We talk about a professional, Andre Lowdown,
yes, sir,
talks about a professional understanding.
That was a great term. I remember when he talked about it years ago. You know, I can tell you in the early days, it was a contentious, and I don't want to call it relationship, but engagement with law enforcement, because we hadn't professionalized ourselves, right? And so Howard Euler, Tony Massengales, and other elders in the work would be the buffer in between interventionists and law enforcement. And there were some officers who understood that you couldn't cross the line nor have interventionists cross the line on telling or informing on community. And we fought for a while to really, you know, concretely speak to that. But then when we doubled down and put that in writing and developed the standards, it allowed us to not only talk through it, but professionalize it by incorporating it in all trainings with interventionists and then handing that over to PD. It's a thin line where folks have a similar role to play because it's all about safety, but law enforcement comes from a punitive perspective at times. You got community safety that law enforcement is playing with CSP in LA. That's a different kind of role. But I think intervention, CVI work in particular, has to be non-punitive.
Absolutely.
And having that professional understanding in place is just simply meaning we understand your role, you understand ours. You know what we don't do as practitioners and vice versa on the other side. And so I think LA has done a good job. There were hiccups in time where the narrative shifted to where PD was really trying to overtake the work. And so we had to defend that for years. But I'll say across the country in different cities, it varies. And we've been in cities where PD is working hand in hand with CVI, and it feels a little bit different. But what I've always said, that if you're going to do the work at a high level, but also maintain relationships with community, there has to be a line drawn in the sand. It's not about disagreement. It's not about disrespect. But in order to have the trust, because this is relationship-based work, then folks have to understand that you're not in a position to be punitive with folks who come from community but may be gang involved. They're still community members, and so that trust has to be optimal for you to be effective on the ground.
Yeah, and I think there's different approaches and different models that people utilize, and really about readiness. About do you have a history of doing intervention? Do you have folks that could actually step into that gap and make sure that they're representing that voice, that mediator voice?
Absolutely.
When there's conflict. So the national level, we have CVI being talked about at the federal level, federal dollars coming out. We have folks that are supportive of us that come from the field that are helping to get dollars out to the different communities. State level, CalVIP, Giffords has played a big role in that, our brother Paul out there. And then, we have dollars in the county, in the city, and a little bit of private dollars that are, getting invested. I mean, what do you see, moving forward? What's the next 5 years going to look like, not only in LA, but also nationally from your perspective?
Well, I think here in LA, it's important that we collectively have a open discussion with philanthropy and also the business sector about everybody playing a role in public and community safety. And making sure that, one, we have the opportunity to scale up the work, but also help develop the infrastructure and support around grassroots nonprofits who have a heart for the work. They're indigenous to the communities that they're serving, but haven't been properly invested to build up their organizations. And so I think philanthropy plays a key role because the unrestricted dollars help agencies tremendously, right? Obviously, there's a scope of work, there's a level of support that's needed, but city, county, and state dollars are limited. And you have to subscribe to the scope of work, but also spend every dollar down to the T based on what you said you would do. So I think a proper blend and also having the business community play a role because I haven't seen that level of investment here in Chicago. We were able to get the business community to buy in. They have up to this point invested over $60 million in Chicago, and then philanthropy invested over $100 million in Chicago. And so that really solidified the work at a higher level. But I also think we should be talking with philanthropy here in California about sharing best practices with other cities. Because if we set the tone and imagine if we get to a vision, 200 homicides, 100 homicides, and everybody has played a role in investing in the work, we all have the opportunity to not take credit, but play a role in ensuring that communities are even safer.
Yeah, I mean, everyone can contribute to peace, in our communities. I mean, how about at the individual level? Maybe folks that can donate money or have some means that they want to contribute to it. What role do you think they can play?
I think they could play a tremendous role. I think what's happened in the past is there were high-earning individuals who've given money to agencies who may not have done right by the dollars that they were given. And so I think when you have intermediaries like an Urban Peace Institute, the Latino Coalition, and other groups that could play a role to say, look, we collectively have a coalition, we have support for folks, the city can assist and guide and who's doing great work, what support is needed. I think those high earning individuals could also play a role in helping to enhance the work on the ground. And then I think even individual, right? Community members who really don't understand what CVI is, but want to contribute. I think having them, one, doing a public education opportunity to talk through what it looks like, what the ultimate goal is, and how community can assist. I think every dime, every dollar would be helpful to make sure that the impact is even greater than what it is today.
Yeah, no, I agree.